Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy that you're here. We all are. I'm Linda Burch. I'm a co-founder of Common Sense Media and its Chief Strategy Officer. And I'm joined on this panel by Richard Culatta, who's the CEO of ISTE, the International Society for Technology Education. I got it. And Sophia Mendoza, who's the Director of Instructional Technology Initiative at LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District. And I should also say that Richard is the author of a brand new book called Digital for Good that you will all hear a little bit about during this conversation, but I wanted to give him a shout out. It's a great, great book. And we're here to talk about digital citizenship education and how it has evolved over the past decade, why it's so important, and why it needs to continue to evolve to meet the moment. And just to kind of frame that up a bit, I wanted to kind of acknowledge for all of us, what a challenging 18 months it's been. A global pandemic and a shift to remote learning overnight with 55 million kids, having to distance learn, and educators and families scrambling to keep their kids learning and emotionally strong. A racial justice reckoning in the summer that was really hard to watch and hard to digest, and happened on media and technology in a profound way. The revealing of the disparities created by the digital divide, and finally acknowledging that they needed to be addressed. And finally, a very divisive presidential election in which media and technology was at the center. And in fact, media and technology has been at the center of our lives this entire 18 months, past year. Huge for our kids, huge for all of us. On the one hand, we've seen how it can bring us together and lift our spirits during the pandemic, and on the other hand, we've seen how it can amplify hate speech and misinformation in a profound way. And so what we thought we'd do is start out with a simple question, I guess it's a compound question, to Richard first. How have you seen digital citizenship evolve over the past decade, and what do you think is important now in terms of the challenges that we face for the future?
Awesome. Great way to start. And hello, everyone. Welcome. We're glad to have you part of this conversation. And and by the way, we decided we're going to, instead of having like a separate moderator, we're going to just sort of we're just going to have a conversation in front of you, because we're all, this is an area that we all care deeply about. So I'm going to answer a little bit of this question, but then I have some questions I'd love to ask you. So we're going to keep kind of bouncing the ball back and forth either way. But let me start. And I'll just say, look, there has been a bit of a shift that's starting. I wouldn't say we're there yet, but I think we're going in the right direction. And that is this. When we use the word digital citizenship, when we talk about what we're teaching with digital citizenship, there is a gap between what that term means and what we see in practice. And so when I visit schools, when I talk with schools, there was a while when I would go there and I say, "Are you doing anything to teach digital citizenship?" And they were like, "What's that?" Right? Nothing. No. Then we evolved a bit more. And then it was like, "Hey, are you doing anything to teach digital citizenship?" It was like, "Yes, we are." And I'd be like, "Yes, what are you doing?" "Well, we're teaching to have secure passwords and to, make sure you don't share your personal information and make sure you don't bully somebody online." The challenge with this is that is such a thin veneer of what we need to be preparing our kids for in order to be successful humans in a virtual world. And I think a little bit about, so I have 4 kids. See the gray hair? I have 4 kids, and one of my kids is learning to drive, extra gray hair. And so when we get in the car, the first thing we do is we put on our seatbelt. There's no question about that. The seatbelt's going on before we move the car. But that's not where we spend all of our time when we talk about preparing her to drive. Could you imagine if I said, "Just put on your seatbelt, now you are good to drive"? Like, she'd be mowing down people all over town. Right? And so one of the things that we do is we say, no, who are we going with? Where are we going? What are the rules of the road? What happens when something goes wrong? What do we do when we get lost? Right? We talk about how to be a good member of our, driving society, if you will, right? It's the same when we talk about digital citizenship. If all we do is stop when it says, how can you keep yourself safe? right? That does not set you up for success. And it's also really, really selfish. Can we just be clear about that? Being like, how to keep yourself safe is incredibly selfish if you're not also talking about how do you create inclusive and safe spaces for others, and how do you use your access to the digital world to engage with your community, to have your voice be heard. We'll talk more about that in a second, right? Have your voice be heard, to be informed, to be balanced, and know how to balance the tech use in your life. That's the conversation that we need to evolve towards. I'm seeing it start to happen. COVID helped accelerate that a little bit, but far too much of our conversation is still focused on just block and tackle online safety, and it's far too negative. Don't do this, don't do that. Don't be a jerk, don't do this, don't share your, but don't. It is far too negative. If we want to create a compelling virtual environment, we have got to switch that and start to articulate what we want people to be as they evolve and grow in this digital world. So, probably a longer answer than you wanted. This is a wind me up and watch me go subject. I got to tell you.
It's great. Sophia, you're on the ground in LA. What have you been seeing? How has it evolved? What do you think needs to happen?
Yeah, well, yes, safety, security, privacy, that's where we started. And that laid a foundation for where we are now, and we still have a long road ahead of us. So, where do we go now as we start to evolve? Really looking at being an agent, right? A digital agent. And what does that mean? It means like really being proactive in your participation online, in your experiences. And most importantly, and I know you alluded to this earlier, was around the civic engagement piece. That is really huge right now with our students, really ensuring that we are leveraging digital citizenship for civic and social engagement and I want to say this really clearly, for college and career success. That's our why, for college and career success. Also thinking about, your digital self. What is your persona? What is your digital presence with purpose? One of our biggest movements in making this shift and this evolution is, what is your digital presence with purpose saying about you in the digital space? And also, how are you collaborating with others in an empathetic way that is, again, being proactive and not waiting for something to happen? If anything, I want to bring some urgency around this conversation, because in the K-12 space, as we have seen over the last 18 months, this is threaded throughout. Digital citizenship is no longer a set aside, no longer can be siloed. It is everywhere. So that's why I want to bring about this urgency that digital citizenship is now embedded in all content areas. Leverage it wherever you are in that K-12 space.
Yeah. Common Sense Media has been focused on digital citizenship for about a decade. And our curriculum, it's a full K through 12 curriculum that we launched in 2009. And I always tell this story that, way back then, I used to follow the law enforcement guy on the stage who was talking about predators, and it scared every parent and every educator up the wazoo. And then I had to come on the stage and say, honestly, calm down. This is a world that our kids are going to live in and inherit. It's going to evolve. We need to future-proof them with skills for whatever comes down the pike. And today we have 1.2 million educators teaching that curriculum in 90,000 schools across the country, 83% of the Title I schools. And the topics have evolved dramatically. So yes, privacy and security. Yes, cyberbullying, and now online hate speech, which is real and arising in schools across the country. Issues around identity development, race and representation in the media and how that develops identity. Questions about relationships and communications, kids that are either tethered to their devices or not knowing how to respond socially to people who are continually texting them. And then I would say, the biggest new focus in our work in digital citizenship is around media and news literacy, elevating it again to a place where it really belongs in the center of this work with the misinformation that we've talked about, and doing that in the context of a leaning into civic learning and into the dispositions that kids need to be able to communicate across difference online, have good civil online discourse. So some of those are the newly emerging questions for us. And then healthy media balance. This is all about, it's not about screen time, it's about healthy media balance in the context in which it surfaces, and how you have kids focused on their digital well-being. So, Sophie, jump in. We're not practiced at this.
No, I want to follow up on that, and I'd love your thoughts. Actually, I'd love to hear from both of you, so forgive me for just jumping in here. But one of the things, I think one of the challenges is that we have not done a good job of sharing examples of how technology can give students voice. And voice for good, right? And so for example, one of the things that I used to be a teacher. I'm gonna do this little disclosure moment. I'm gonna do a little confessional here. I used to be a teacher, and when I was a teacher, we used to tell I tell my kids, your voice, you matter, your voice matters. But everything in the system was set up to tell them that was not true, right? We say you don't have any input into the curriculum that you're being taught, or to when or how are you doing it. You can't vote until you're much older than you are now. All the stuff we're learning, it's for some hypothetical future. So we say your voice matters. Oh, all the people that we taught them about in history were all adults, right? No, we never talked about kids that did important things. So we had this message of you matter, but you actually don't really. And one of the things that I love, that it makes me so excited about the way technology can empower kids, is it can give them a voice. It can help them actually be able to have engagement in meaningful ways, not just pretend practice ways that they will happen down the road. But I do think that's important to talk about. So I'd love to just punt that to either side. Do you have examples, I mean, especially with the stuff you've been doing in some of your schools, of where students have been using technology to have a real impactful voice in the world that they live in now?
One example that I like to share just really blew me away, had me just in awe. From our secondary students. Last school year, we knew we were heading into distance learning. We grouped together and we refined one of our lessons that we created together with our common sense partners. And teachers, our educators, secondary educators in the advisory rooms, taught a both synchronous and asynchronous course to our secondary students that was for all students in secondary. So imagine, across 720 square miles, you had all of our secondary students participating in a digital citizenship lesson, where at the end we provided a sandbox for the students to share what was most important to them in the civic and social topics of the moment. And I was blown away with everything from what mattered to them in the global warming crisis, what was happening with the election, racial and social justice. And we created a platform where students from all across the district were able to provide each other feedback and just say, yes, I'm with you on that. Tell me more about this. And really created that space so that when they go out and participate outside of that sandbox, they have already practiced. So I think that was our biggest lesson learned there. Provide those opportunities for students to practice before.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting at this moment in time is that at Common Sense, we've always created lessons that also included media creation and expression, so that young people had an opportunity to use their voices in a reflective way, in a way where they're actually thinking about what they're putting out in the world. And this moment, when you have this much combative language, and when you have, the rise of hate speech, and really pointed, this is not cyberbullying anymore. This is kind of communication against groups. How do you empower that student agency in a scaffolded way that it allows it to turn into discourse that's really positive? And I think there are great examples. One of our partners, we co-created our curriculum with a group called Project Zero at Harvard Graduate School of Education. And their pedagogy is what we embody in the work that we do that is about empowering student voice. And they call them digital dilemmas and thinking routines. And the digital dilemmas are taking these thorny issues that may not have a right and wrong answer. Do you post a video of violent streaming content that has been put online? Do you post that if you're a kid? Do you post something when someone has outed someone else on a political issue, and do you shame them around it? I mean, these are, thorny questions. And what we've developed together are these thinking routines that really encourage kids to slow down and reflect, to take different perspectives with empathy and curiosity, to try to lean into evidence around an issue, to then really think about how they want to put themselves out in the world, and finally then to take action. And just the process of slowing down allows kids to be themselves, express who they are, but create that dialogue that you want to have when you've got that student agency and the voice in a period of time when there's lots and lots of difference of opinion. So that's one way that we've seen it come to life.
Something that's very interesting, and this is something, so when I was writing Digital for Good, when I was writing the book, one of the things that I did is I talked with a lot of educators, a lot of parents, and was looking at, some of the myths and some of the, just challenges. There's a lot of stress. You guys, there's a lot, some of you have kids at home, there's a lot of stress around how to create an effective digital culture in our homes and in classrooms as well, but a lot of stress around that. And so some of this is also just trying to say, how do we de-stress this, and how do we ask the questions that can help make some of this, more, I don't know, just, it's like the old thing, how do you eat the elephant, right? Like one bite at a time. Like we just need to say, how do we make this a little more bite-sized? So let me just share one thing. There's hope, by the way. There's hope in a lot of this. I am actually incredibly optimistic about the future if we're able to do a couple things. So here's one example. When you look at the evidence around cyberbullying, and there is some interesting studies. So the Pew Research looked, and somewhere around like 90% of students say they've witnessed some sort of cyberbullying that has happened online. And they say that actually it was a little lower than that. I think it was like 75% witness it. But here's the crazy stat: 90% say that of those who witnessed it, say they did nothing. And it's not because these aren't bad kids. It's because in this sort of approach that we've taken of saying, how do you protect yourself and keep yourself safe? We have not practiced how do you actually intervene and help when you see it happening to somebody else. It is not something we have practiced to do. Now, I told you this could be hopeful. I said it was going to be hopeful, and then it sounded really depressing. There's hope here. The evidence shows that it's actually a very small amount of intervention that it takes to stop cyberbullying or to make inclusive spaces. It literally just takes somebody going, hey, stop it, that's my friend, or we don't talk like that here. Like, it's not much. And so if we can practice those skills of saying, here's how to intervene, here's how to move from a bystander to an upstander, we can very quickly transform this virtual world into a place that we really want to be and that we want to live. But that requires us rethinking the conversation. And there's one other part that I'll add in there, which is there's this, I get people that ask me this all the time. I don't know if you get this, but I have people say, why do we need to teach digital citizenship? Let's just teach citizenship. Like, let's just teach you to be good people. Guess what? The way our brains work, if you learn something in one context and then you're expected to demonstrate it in another context, anybody who's studied assessment knows this, it is very hard to transfer those skills from one to the other. So if we look at places, in kindergarten teachers are masters at this, right? They're masters at, a kid comes up and takes the block from the other kid's hands and whacks him on the head, and the teacher goes, wait, this is a learning moment. If you want to borrow the block, this is where we ask in a nice voice, can I take a turn? Let's practice it. We practice all that stuff out, right? If you practice those skills in a physical environment, but don't practice and don't demonstrate them in a virtual environment, it should not be a surprise that those skills are not transferring. And so the reason this idea of digital citizenship is so critical is that if we aren't practicing, if we're not demonstrating, not the list of don'ts, but practicing what these skills look like in a virtual space, how to intervene, how to act, how to make a change, how to call out in appropriate ways misinformation, how to ask whether something is legitimate or not, those skills will not transfer. But again, the good news is, if you just teach them in the virtual space, if you model in the environment, it is not very hard to turn that behavior around.
Yeah, I'm curious, Sophia, what are the tools that you've been using at LAUSD that you're finding really work? What are the interventions and what are the tools that are really working?
So, we have, over 25,000 educators, and we want to make sure we support them where they are. So really looking at a continuum of supports. And some of these supports aren't that new. They're really just robust, rigorous supports that have been around for some time. Some are newer than others. But for the most part, we noticed that there was a gap. There were materials for educators and students, but where there was a big gap for educators themselves to be learners, right? Because we didn't see where was that. So with our partners, and just really in-house looking at what we could develop, looking at specifics on how to support educators develop their own presence with purpose. So, big kudos to the LA Unified team for going into the workshop and creating sessions that were really meaningful for the educators. But in addition to our own homegrown professional learning experiences, some of the partnerships that we've been able to utilize, number one, for the entry point coming in educators would be the Common Sense Certified Educator. Definitely a great place to take your first step and resources. Then a little bit more on the continuum would be taking your practice to the next level would be become an ISTE certified educator where you can deepen your understanding and your learning and your practices and competencies in digital citizenship. And then next level, which we've started to explore this last school year and going to go full charge this school year, is our partnership with KQED and their media literacy certification for educators. That's just really taking it to the next level where we've really wanted to go. But we understand that we service a continuum of learners and we want to ensure that we're meeting our educators where they are.
That's fascinating. I wanted to pick up on what you were saying about practice, both of you, because I think practicing these digital citizenship skills can take different forms across the K-12 spectrum. So those thinking routines that I was talking about, which are more aimed at middle and high school, scenario plays and role plays, et cetera. With little kids, it's things that educators know very well. It's chants, it's song, it's poetry. Saying goodbye to your technology becomes really easy if you pause and you breathe and you say goodbye. So I think lots of the tricks that have been part of education for years and years just need to be brought back into the fold here. And then I think the second piece is that authentic experience with technology and practicing digital citizenship. So there are student interactive games that are really compelling. Common Sense has worked with Cornell's Social Media Lab to create something called Test Drive, which helps kids think about how they navigate social media together. So I think that combination of teacher-guided instruction and scaffolding, group discussion, and then some fun, interactive play and media production kind of brings it all home.
By the way, this is a little bit different, but you said fun, and so I had to call this out. If you have not seen the great videos that Common Sense Media made with Will Ferrell on taking a device break at dinner time, device-free meals, you seriously need to just stop whatever you're doing and watch them right now. They're hilarious. They're so good, and they make the point so well in a fun, supportive way. So it's actually one of my favorite things is just learn from that, pass that around. It's really awesome.
Who else needs to be part of this conversation? Richard, you're there connecting to all the technology educators in the country. You've written a book that's really for parents. who all needs to be part of the conversation around elevating the importance of digital citizenship?
I think, yeah, that's such a great question. I think we as an education community have, for whatever reason, like decided that this is our issue to take on our own. and I'm not saying don't do it. Like this whole everything we're saying, the three of us, like we need to care about this in education. But this is, digital citizenship is a team sport, right? It is not something that the education community can do on their own. So our parents have to be very, very closely engaged and involved. And so helping tee up some strategies for them, again, just helping them know how to approach this and ask some questions and to set up the right guidelines in their house to create a good digital culture that's not just about all the don'ts, right? Like that's one thing. But also we have other people that have to play. The developers themselves of the tools, right? This whole conference is filled with people who are building and tools and apps. What's their role in creating apps that are actually teaching effective, especially any app that's doing any sort of collaboration? How are we building into that signposts and opportunities to teach how to be effective collaborators? Certainly when we think about our government partners, right? Where and how are we thinking about the role of policymakers? There is more money going out into schools right now this year than I've seen in the last 10 years combined, right? There is so much money that is going out the door, and like that's a great thing. I'm glad to see that there's money. But where is that going? If all that does is buy another 10 million Chromebooks, like we are in trouble. And so we need to be making sure that as we're creating these policies that we're making sure that funding is being used to help create these helpful conversations around media and technology. And by the way, there's even one more. I mean, I'll stop after this one because this is like I could just kind of go forever on. We need everybody involved in this. But here's one more that we haven't, I don't think, talked enough about too, which is the role of libraries and librarians. Libraries were not, when I was growing up, libraries were the access point. It's where you went to go to get information. Well, that isn't, they've, let me say it this way. It feels like in the many cases, libraries have clung to that role. And so now that things are digital, there's still now a digital access point, right? And what we need to be able to be healthy digital citizens are people who know how to curate good information, how to recognize what's appropriate, true and false, how to classify and categorize information, how to explain it in good ways, guess what? Those are all the skills of librarians. And so I think we really need to be rethinking about their role, both in our schools and in our communities, as being kind of coaches, digital citizenship coaches, as we try to make sense out of this digital world and become really effective members of it. So there you go.
Great. Sophia, what do you think? Who else needs to be involved and how? How do you see a connection between home and school with the district or the informal learning environment and the school district? I'm curious.
Well, I think a lot about the partnerships that we've been able to not only create but sustain over the last 18 months that have really supported the work that we were already on this trajectory, but has now accelerated it. Again, I think about our common sense partners with one of the tools that I even leverage, as a parent of children in our district that I find extremely useful, and in also sharing with other parents is the tech balance. Understanding that we are a very large system, over 600,000 students, having touch points with our parents and meeting our parents where they are, and leveraging a tool like Tech Balance, where you're able to reach out to parents with these bite-sized information tidbits that are sent directly to their phone. And it's not like you're bombarded. You'll get one or two throughout the week with some really, easy tips that make you think, oh my goodness, have I done that? Or, oh wow, I didn't even think about that. So I think one of the biggest pieces is understanding our partnerships and meeting our families where they are.
Yeah. We have always thought about digital citizenship education as a whole community approach. Curriculum for students, professional development for teachers, and really deep and meaningful family and community engagement. And that takes a different form. It's interesting. Our curriculum is in both Spanish and English, but our family engagement resources are in 20 languages, because if you're going to be working in a district, a major district in this country, you need to be able to have multilingual capabilities. And so it's about trying to get the kids to be the experts, empower them to be the experts, bring home activities to engage with families, and then make it a full school community approach that really leads to, I think, deeper learning. I think the question you raise about the libraries is critical, because we all know that the public libraries in this country, during the pandemic, they served a pretty amazing role in making sure that kids who were unconnected and disconnected had access to resources. And they've always been the repositories of media literacy. And so that informal learning network is really important. And I think other community-based organizations that do, everything from computer science, Girls Who Code, to youth media and news literacy are also people that should be in the mix. When I think about the tech industry, we have some partnerships with learning.com and Nearpod that have our curriculum on their content, on their platforms. AT&T is about to do a partnership with us with the Public Library Association around creating new student interactives. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Richard, about the creativity of the EdTech community, bringing that to this work of digital citizenship. Yes, it's not core subject matter, but what could be more important in this world than getting kids ready to be engaged with technology in all aspects of their lives, learning and everything else. And I firmly believe that if we are teaching computer science in schools and we're talking about digital literacy and tech literacy, digital citizenship is not a nice to have. It is an essential corollary to teaching about technology. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, we're going to see policies, and we're putting pressure at Common Sense on the policymakers to think about funding that flows for tech, for computers, connectivity, for great instructional materials, but also for this digital citizenship education. That's a fervent wish of ours. What else do we want to share?
Can I piggyback on that for a second? So you just said something that I think we should double down on a little here, which is this idea of computer science. And we've been doing a lot of work on teaching computer science. I hope that there's fair recognition of people in this room, at least, that that's something that we care about, and a bunch of people that are online. Hi. We also need to be thinking about, should we be blurring the lines between digital citizenship and teaching computer science? And we've done some work. We have some collaboration with our friends at the College Board that does the AP programs, including APCS. Well, they have APCS. They also have AP Government or AP Civics. And they have been doing this program, and some of you may be aware of this, over the last couple of years, where they're actually merging the two. They're sort of blending the two and teaching them together. And their point being, we should be teaching computer science as a tool in order to put what we're learning in government, in civics, into action. And vice versa, we should be teaching the basics of civics and civic engagement in a way that can be implemented through the tech tools that we're teaching. And so that blurring of the lines between teaching digital citizenship and teaching computer science, I think, is something that I would love. We were talking about evolution,
yes,
right?
Yes.
That's maybe the next evolution I would like to see is a much more integrated, sort of much fuzzier line between those, and other subject areas too, but certainly between those two.
Yes. Sophia, are you seeing that in LA? Are you seeing this kind of digital literacy, computer science, digital citizenship all coming together?
Yes, well, on the horizon, we have, some very proactive board members. Most recently, our board members have passed a resolution to teach critical media literacy. And in the work that we've been leading for over the last 7 years is integration of the ISTE standards, coupled with computer science education and digital citizenship. So now we are, in the works right now to ensure that those content areas don't live in silos and that they are integrated throughout all content areas. So be on the lookout for what we will be bringing you soon.
Great. I think there's something really interesting. We've talked about civics, we've talked about computer science. It seems that there's a moment where the digital lives of our kids, or the digital context in which they're living, it's not the digital lives anymore, it's their lives, connects with a lot of different disciplines in education. Social and emotional learning is, in many ways, when I was speaking of those dispositions, that's the underpinning of this digital citizenship curriculum. It's about learning how to understand how to protect yourselves, but how to be self-aware and protect others, how to empower others, how to think about others. So SEL's at the core. We've just developed a new collection of lessons that are connecting SEL teachers to digital citizenship. We call it SEL in Digital Life. And I anticipate that will happen with civic learning as well. And in many ways, news and media literacy has been the connective tissue between digital citizenship and civic learning. And what I'm hoping is that in the future, there's a core set of these skills and dispositions that embrace all of this together. And we're talking about kids becoming, robust, active, pro-social positive, members of society. So with that, we're getting close to the end. Why don't I pose, a question to each of us. Richard, if you had a call to action for this audience today, what would it be? What would you want folks to walk out of here?
Okay, one call to action. Let me think what I do. I'll come as close as I can to obeying the instructions here. I think there's maybe one kind of part A and part B, and we've said a little bit this before, but one is be very thoughtful about involving parents in the communication. We have not done a great job of teeing up parents to be successful in this, and so that's a first step. And again, just helping set up a framework that is a healthy framework that is positive and not the list of don'ts. The second thing is, again, we need to eat our own dog food in schools. And that means that we need to look at the conditions that we're setting. And just shortly before this, actually, as we were getting ready, I was speaking for another group. And before I did that, I just went online and just quickly pulled some of the, device use agreements, acceptable use agreements that schools had. And I found one school, they were all like this, but one that said 35 don'ts. It was a list of don'ts. 35. I don't know if I could come up with 35 ways to not use technology, even if I tried, but they did. They had 35 of them, and not a single do. 0 do's, not a single do. What is the point? Throw it all away. If all we can do is say what not to do, then just throw it away. And so I think we need to be very thoughtful about flipping that and saying, and here are the things that we want you to be doing, that we expect you to do for using this technology to improve your life and those around you. If we do those two things, honestly, if we just do those two things, we will see a huge shift in the way we think about using technology to enrich our lives. So there's my part 1, 2 call to action.
Sophia.
So I know we cannot do this work alone. That's why I'm calling on our higher ed partners. So higher ed partners out there, please include this evolution of digital citizenship for your pre-service teachers who are seeking their credentials, but also don't forget about your aspiring administrators. Include that in their credential work as well. That way we are not backfilling once our new teachers arrive in our schools, and that way our administrators can support all educators. That's my call to action for our higher ed partners.
Fabulous. Well, we are at the end of our time. Thank you so much for coming. Go forth into the world with digital citizenship banner for all of us here. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.